This conference will now be recorded.
We can see your face, so that's up to you if you want your camera on.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. It's interesting to be back at home on GoToMeeting. Thankfully, it's not due to a global pandemic. It's just due to a little flood. This is Zeus for everybody. This is the first time I've done it in Exhorts with my cat hanging around. So, and Jess is here as well. Right. Okay. So let's get this going. Okay. So even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. Now, to be honest, that's a really tricky verse to open with when you're about to speak for 20 minutes. And I'm half tempted to just kind of leave that slide up there and finish it here, just so I don't come across as too foolish. But I really like this. I really like this verse. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. And that's Proverbs 17, verse 28. So I'm going to come back to the topic shortly. As it was introduced, the topic is say less. But before we go there, just a little bit of background on my career. I've been in sales pretty much my entire career. My very first job ever was working at the meat department of Foodtown Meadowbank. I spent quite some time looking for a photograph of me in my blue uniform with my the thing that would go over your hair, because I think I had long hair at the time. I had hair at the time, so it was quite a while back. And I loved this job. I was flogging rump steaks, mince, chicken breasts, all your meaty treats. I was your man. And certainly many 16-year-olds, you know, they see their first job as kind of just, you know, it's just something that you got to do to get a bit of pocket money. But to be honest, I was determined to hone my sales skills and really earn that $6.75 an hour that I was getting paid at the time. And I'm sure many of us have had sales-related jobs either in the past, or you might actually have one now. I guess jobs where it's your responsibility to take a product or a service, and some products and services are easier to sell than others. And it's your role to convince potential customers that they want, well, actually that they really need the product that you're selling. And in my case, it was the filet mignon. Now, as my career developed across many roles with many days spent in sales training seminars, one of the main things that you learn in sales as you develop is to actually say less. You learn to ask targeted questions. You actually learn to get your customer to do more of the speaking so that you can learn more about your customer. What you're trying to do is you're trying to learn about their needs. So by strategic questioning, you can get your customer talking, you can build up a rapport, and eventually you can actually get them to, you can almost get them to talk themselves into realizing that they have a very certain product. And that's when you swoop in with the solution that you just so happen to be selling that day. So that's pretty much Sales 101 in a nutshell. Now, the hallmark of a rookie salesperson, and also something that is very easy to slip into when you're under excessive pressure, it's very easy to slip back into just launching into a sales pitch. As soon as someone walks through the door, it's about saying too much too soon. It's about launching into a 15-minute impassioned sermon as to why this person should buy the eye fillet that you're selling, only to find at the end of your talk that they only came in for some gravy beef for their cat. And I'm sure we've all experienced something along these lines in our lives, when we've been nervous, we've been stressed out, we've been under pressure, and we've just resorted to blurting out a million words per minute. It might be the moment that you first talk to your crush. You might put your foot in it at a job interview. As I say, I'm sure you're probably thinking about an experience where you've said too much too soon. And fast-paced babbling can come purely from having anxious energy, for not knowing what to say, so going for quantity of words rather than quality. While some people do clam up under pressure, others are overwhelmed with many ideas running through their head all at once and an unstoppable desire to communicate them all at once. And our brains are busy places. Your average person has between 12,000 and 80,000 thoughts per day. It's your brain navigating through the daily obligations. It's your brain working out how to get you out of bed, how to get you to school, how to get you to work. It's solving problems like how to get the stuck lid off the jar. Does this milk smell funny or not? And during idle times, your brain doesn't stop. You might find that your mind sometimes goes to some very funny places, pondering unanswerable questions like, do fish get thirsty? Is the letter S or C silent in the word sent? Why do we cook bacon but bake cookies? Interestingly, many of the thoughts that you have today will be very similar to the thoughts that you had yesterday. So one interesting thing is it's said that certainly the vast majority of our thoughts actually are negative in nature. And this is where managing our thoughts is really important. We need to actively consider our thoughts, identify what thoughts are valid and need to be considered further, and what thoughts are intrusive, negative in nature, thoughts that need to be acknowledged for what they are and dismissed. Now, I'm sure we've all met someone who has no filter, someone who tends to run their mouth before the brain engages. If we're honest, I'm sure there are times when we've done the same. We've said too much too soon. We've engaged our mouths before our minds have had a chance to scrutinize the thoughts. We've shown ourselves as foolish because we were not discerning with our words. I found this little quote that I quite like from Plato. Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools speak because they have to say something. So given the amount of junk thoughts that we have each day, if we're not discerning in our speech, it stands to reason that the majority of our words will also be junk. Our conversations will be junk, and what we say matters. So when it comes to taming the tongue, to discerning the words from our mouths, what does the Bible have to say about it? Quite an awful lot, it seems. So this picture here is my dining room table this week. And I printed out pretty much as many relevant verses as I possibly could, all related to taming the tongue or speech. So it's incredibly clear from this that that God's got quite a lot to tell us about controlling what we say. In fact, actually, one of the challenging things that I had in putting this talk together was really discerning what aspect of it I was going to focus on. There was so much content, and all of these verses were very meaningful. And I do recommend it, actually, if you do have time and you're interested, just jump on Google or get out your concordance and just do a quick study on speech and what we say. Heaps and heaps of tidbits from pretty much spanning the entire Bible, from Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, all the way through to the Gospels. And Jesus was really big on this topic as well. So that's how we know that controlling our speech is a crucial component to our Christian lives, and it requires our attention. So this is going to be the kind of the hero verse that we'll be referring to for the rest of the talk. And it comes from James 1, chapters 19 to 20. And it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." So there's quite a bit in that verse. I'm going to unpack it just a little bit. And it's easy to kind of read this verse as part of your readings. It's easy to acknowledge that, those are wise words, but it's also very easy to move on without actually really having to think about them and considering how these could apply to our lives. So that's essentially what we're going to do today. So there are three key components in this verse. Essentially, there's listen, so being quick to listen. The second point I've got is slow to speak, and reading into that, I think we can say consider. So it's about taking the time to consider while you're not speaking or you're being slow to speak. It's not that your brain's not engaging. That's exactly what it is doing. It's engaging that brain. It's taking a moment to ease off before you reply. So you've got time to actually go through those thoughts to get the correct ones in before you do speak. And then number three is slow to become angry. And so what I've put this down is applying grace. And I'll explain a little bit more about that shortly. So listen, be quick to listen, as the verse puts it. So in order to listen, it's quite logical that the first thing we need to do is to be quiet, to speak less. And it stands to reason that the less you speak, the more you hear. The less output you have, the greater the capacity for input that you have. And the more you listen, the more information that you take on board. And done over time, this will increase what you know. And it will make you very, very aware of what you don't know, which in itself is a lesson in humility. It is with humility that we need to listen in order to develop our spiritual lives. We read in Luke 11, verse 28, "Blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it." So through listening, we are to learn obedience and to receive blessings. Romans 10 verses 11 tells us that faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. So listening develops and refines our faith. James 1 verse 22 exhorts us, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." So we listen to take action, to know what action to take. And what happens when we stop listening? In Proverbs 19 verse 27, it says, "Stop listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the word of knowledge." So running through that again, in terms of in listening more, we learn obedience, we receive blessings, we grow our faith, we learn what action to take, and we take action, and we receive knowledge. And the reality is we live in a noisy world. We're all very, very much connected. We're told that our opinion matters, that we deserve to be heard. Everyone has their opinion and everyone feels the need to make themselves known. Everybody is talking, but so few of us have the humility to actually listen. So the next aspect of the verse is consider, so be slow to speak. So what does that actually mean, to be slow to speak? Now, if someone says you're a little bit slow, they're suggesting that you're not the smartest cookie. However, being slow to speak is essentially the opposite. It is intelligence. It's about taking the time to process and consider the information that you've been taking in while listening, the first part of this verse. And it actually takes great skill and practice to learn to take a moment, to breathe and consider before responding. In an argument, in particular, when you've been wrong, when you're upset, we've all said things that we regret in our lives. And we know that we can't take our words back, that the damage has been done. Now, in fact, this reminds me of a visual that I'm not too sure who did it. I remember seeing it at the Pakuranga Ecclesia. It might have been Robert. And it's an analogy essentially where someone is given a tube of toothpaste and they're told to squirt it all out onto the table. And they squirt it all out onto the table. And then once they've done that, they're told to put it all back into the tube. And really, that's a pretty much effectively impossible task. And the analogy of that is about that our words are similar. That when we speak, when those words are out, they cannot easily be taken back in. It's more about damage control rather than taking them back. And that little analogy stuck with me. And thank you very much, Robert, if it was you. If it wasn't, and it was you, whoever it was, thank you. It was great. I really enjoyed that. It stuck with me. So really what I'm saying is we need to be careful with our words. We need to be considerate with our speech. We need to be discerning in our conversation. The topics that we talk about and definitely the language that we use as well. Proverbs 15 verse 28 says, "The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things." And in Proverbs 18 verse 13 it says, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame." In Proverbs 21 verse 23, you might see that Proverbs has an awful lot of wisdom, being a book of wisdom. "Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble." And I'm sure as well we've all experienced the pain of harsh words in our lives. That horrific feeling of realizing that those around you have been talking about you behind your back. Cruel taunts from other kids at school. Words can be so incredibly destructive, while at the same time, words can be so incredibly uplifting. A kind word discreetly uttered, a text from a friend just checking in to say hello, reassurance from a loved one. So it stands to reason. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but Zeus has come back and the cat is saying hello. A kind word, oh, sorry, where am I up to? So it stands to reason that as Christians, our speech really does matter, and we need to control our tongues. Jesus tells us it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person, which really illustrates this point. So if you stop and listen to the world around us, you're going to hear a lot of foolish talk. Sit and listen to the conversations going on in your lunchroom, conversations on the bus, on social media, on what we're watching on TV. And we do need to stand apart from this. We now live in an age where abstaining from the use of profanity is actually noticed because it's so unusual. It's abnormal. And what a wonderfully simple way to stand for Christ, simply by what we don't say. You don't have to actively take action. You literally just don't have to do something. How easy is that? And in Colossians 4 verse 6, it says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." And in Ephesians 4 verse 29, it says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give something to those who hear." Sorry, grace to those who hear. Written grave there. Give grace to those who hear. So see, words matter. That really changes everything. So again, just consider your speech. It's really important. Consider the words that you use. Consider what you say. Be slow to speak. Say less. And I found this little quote here from an author. It says, "Don't speak unless it improves on silence." And this is something I really relate to. I quite enjoy silence sometimes, and if someone's going to break that, there's got to be a good reason for it. You know? So therefore, our talk should be edifying. It should be uplifting. It should be meaningful. And then we move on to apply grace, and I've kind of put the title there, but that's the "and slow to become angry" aspect of these verses. So slow to anger. The reality is, if we've correctly applied part 1 and part 2, if we've listened and we've considered, if we've really taken in what has been being communicated and we've practiced saying less, then by its very nature, arguably, we're actually going to become angry less. We're going to decrease the instances where we do fly off the handle. And that is just through communication. That's through clear communication. Often, sometimes you hear someone will say something and you react in a negative and angry way, but it's because they haven't actually had the chance to elaborate on what they mean by what they just said. So why is it important for us to manage our anger? Well, it's written right there in the verse as it finishes with, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So anger is a very natural emotion, and it's a valid part of the human experience. There are times where we're meant to be angry. It's completely normal and rational to be angry. And there are times when even Jesus was angry. And a good example of this is when he cleansed the temple courts. He was furious, and that was valid and that was just. So we cannot avoid anger, but we certainly can manage it. And to say any less is almost a little bit of a cop-out. And I guess a perfect example of this is, say, a couple arguing, absolutely going at each other, yelling and screaming, temperatures are flaring, faces are red. Then the phone rings and it's, oh, hello, how you doing? So you can control your anger. It's very seldom that someone is actually in a state where they have completely lost it. So if we allow ourselves to be controlled by negative emotions, and that's the key, anger can be a negative emotion, and if we let that control us, and if we don't practice mindfulness, if we don't listen and consider before we speak, then we are a slave to our emotions, and we're destined for a life of unnecessary conflict. Unbridled anger is bad for us. It distances us from righteousness, as we get from that verse. It puts a wedge between us and God. And to be fair, it's straight up unhealthy for us as well. Anger has a massive physiological impact on our bodies. When anger takes hold of us, our adrenal glands pump the body full of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. And this is your body, I'm sure we've all heard of fight or flight. It's your body getting ready for fight or flight. Your body is literally getting ready to either sprint a mile or get scrapping. Now, I don't know about you, but certainly my life has very few instances where literally running away, or worse, getting my fists out and scrapping, is a logical, reasonable, and measured response. Maybe I live a little bit of a passive life, but there haven't been many times in my life where that has been the logical thing to do. And so when you're in this fight or flight mode, and that happens a lot because we get angry a lot, so we're getting into the state a lot. Your brain pushes blood to your muscles, and the first place it actually goes away from is your gut. So if you suffer from stomach issues, one of the first things to check is, are you regularly stressed or angry? Because that can be the body literally pulling that much needed blood away from your digestive system into your muscles, getting ready for that fight or flight. And that's why anxious people do tend to have quite a lot of stomach issues. So all of these reactions are very, very useful in a life or death situation, but guess what? Disagreeing with a colleague is not life or death. A scratch on your car's paint, an argument with a loved one. It's natural to feel anger in these situations, but we must keep our anger in check. So when we take time to apply grace, to consider the words that flow from our mouths, we show the righteousness that God desires. Remember, what we say matters. So my message of exhortation today, as we go about our lives, is that we listen, that we take a moment, that we hear what is being said, that we actually say less in certain situations. We don't have to have an answer for everything, but take time, consider, meditate, and mull it over. Don't allow your own words to dig you into a hole. And with grace, with considered thought, our words will produce the righteousness that God desires. And to finish off, there's a really nice quote. I didn't actually write where I got it from, but gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Thank you.